when we've talked before, you were never very sure about writing a book, were you?
No. No, I had to be, I think I've been asked for the last 10 years to write a book, and when I sold Jo Malone, everyone wanted me to write a book then because, you know, you've built this business and then sold it to a big corporation, and then after I survived cancer, that was the time to write the book. And I never felt as I wanted to. I never felt it was the right time, and I wasn't prepared for the emotional baggage that you unpack when you write a book, because when you unpack your memories, they don't come out in order. So you'll flick something and then 7 days later the whole memory will come back to me. And there were times in my childhood that were really painful and really, really tough. So I still remember, you know, the chapter of fighting cancer. I remember that vividly. But your childhood, you know, when I went all the way back, and I think I wasn't prepared to do that. But now, and when I left Jo Malone, I felt that I'd come from a really great height and I was standing in a valley and I didn't know who I was anymore, and I'd look up and think, well, that's who I was, but who am I now? And I knew I couldn't write a book standing in the valley. I had to be standing back on the mountainside. So when I got that telephone call from the World Retail Congress nearly 2 years ago saying, you've been honoured and we'd like to honour you, it was like, but I've only got one shop, but you don't realise I'm not part of that big business anymore. And they said, yes, we know, it's to do with you. And when I heard that, it was like, I'm ready to write my book now.
You're back up on the,
on the mountain. I'm climbing there, but I felt, you know, then when I received the award this year and I was standing there in front of everybody, I realised that I'm not on the top of the mountain, but I've certainly climbed up high enough to write the story. And I'm really glad I did, really glad.
Did you write the book yourself or did you work with someone on it?
No, I had to have a ghostwriter because I'm dyslexic. I would never in a million years have been able to do it. But so I worked with a man who I know very well. But we went back into the flat where I built Jo Malone and where Gary and I first started, so that little apartment. And we sat there for nearly 3-4 months, 10 hours a day. And it was grueling. It was really, and halfway through I stopped and said, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to finish it. And then a week later, I felt, you know what, I can't not. I've now kind of unpacked some of this, and I wanted to continue. And when you write a book like this, it is to tell the story, and it is to hand the baton and say to people, you can do this. Because when people read this, they'll see I'm not the smartest or the cleverest or any of those, or the most charismatic, but I am somebody that doesn't quit. And I think, you know, that's really what this book is all about, is not being a quitter no matter what the world tells you. And I'm really, really happy I've done it now.
We're going to go right back to the beginning of the book, I think, because one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was your childhood, and we won't dwell on it for ages, but your childhood and your parents, and where that kind of sense of not quitting comes from, really. One of the things that I really noticed when I was reading the book is the way that fragrance just weaves itself through your life.
It is funny, that was not on purpose.
That just happened.
But I suppose fragrance is like my compass, so it steers me left, you know, from the roast lamb where my dad hated it, to the smell of the markets, to the eau sauvage, you know, all of those memories that come into being. I suppose my sense of smell was my compass, and it kind of steered me all the way through.
I really felt, reading the beginning again last night, I really felt that I knew what your childhood smelled like.
Oh, how nice.
Eau sauvage and
Joy.
And
then the fireworks.
Yeah, the fireworks and the roast beef versus roast lamb. We probably now need to explain all that because that's not going to make any sense to anybody watching this.
So my dad was an amazing character, very creative, and was a great artist, but he liked the ladies, shall we say. So my mum and him would row a lot, and when they had a really terrible row, she would cook roast lamb, because he had been in I think it was the army, and he'd been on a boat and he'd eaten lamb that was off. So every time he smelt lamb, it would literally make him feel really, really very, very poorly. So when I would walk in the house and I would smell roast lamb, I'd know that they'd had a row or was about to have a row. And I knew that he would literally balk when he walked in the door, and I would get so upset.
And how old were you when this?
5, 6. I don't know, 5, 6 years old.
I keep thinking about little Jo. Some of the things when I was reading it, and now I've seen the picture as well. I'm actually going to find the picture and show the camera, because I think you need to see little Jo. So this one is when you were, this was the Heinz bean one.
Yes.
So what were you, about 3 then?
What does that date? I don't know. Yeah, 3, 4. I can remember sitting in the studios, and my mum had said to me, say Heinz baked beans, or Heinz mean, no, what was it? Beans means Heinz. That's what I was meant to say. And do you think I'd say it? I wouldn't say it. And I sat there and I was really, really nervous. And so I didn't get the job, and she was a little upset with me.
I noticed, we're jumping around a little bit, but I noticed in the book that in relation to your mum, you say a few times that you were worried about disappointing her, and the word you use is disappointed. Is that an overriding thing?
Yes,
from your
I
childhood?
think it was. I think that's I didn't want to disappoint either of my parents, and I felt, because of my dyslexia, although it wasn't diagnosed until I was much older, but I remember a teacher saying to me that I was lazy and stupid. And inside of me, I was like, I'm neither of those. I know I'm certainly not lazy, and I'm really not stupid. But I felt with my mum and dad that I always had to hold it together. As from a young child, it was up to me, really, I was the adult. So I I didn't want to disappoint them. I wanted everyone to be happy in the house. But isn't that really what children want the whole time, is for mum and dad to get on and everyone to be happy? And our house wasn't really always like that. There was always that, those tough times. And I was always the one that had to pick up the pieces, always. Jo's got it. She'll sort it out. And so I never wanted to let them down or disappoint them. And I was always terrified if I let, the plate slip, it would all fall apart. And I didn't want that.
And that started almost from when Tracy was born. Tracy, your little sister. Is she 2 or 3 years younger than you?
5, she was.
5?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you were old enough to be grown up.
Well, when
Not
you think,
really, but...
now that I'm a parent, I look back. I tell you what happened, though, writing this book, is there's a lot in my childhood that made me sad, and a lot that made me happy. But writing this book, I fell in love with my mum and dad all over again, because I suddenly realised they'd done their very best. And you know what, as a parent, that is all you can do. We're not perfect. And now a parent myself, I do my best, and sometimes I fail and sometimes I succeed. We were always loved. There was always huge amounts of love in our family. And if it hadn't been from my mum and dad and my sister, I wouldn't have done half of the things or learnt how to do so many of those things. And I feel, even though the 3 of them are no longer with us in this world, I feel very protective of that memory as well. That I want, if they can hear, I want them to know that I love them, and I hope I never disappointed them.
I'm sure you didn't.
I'm sure I did sometimes.
Well, yeah.
I think we all do.
Maybe when you let your sister break out and go to the newsagent and spend all your money.
Oh, yes. My birthday money, that was.
Oh, man. There's a scene in the book where you're talking about, because money was always tight, wasn't it, in your family? And there's a really moving scene when I think I might be making this up, are you looking in the bathroom mirror, and I think you're about 10 years old, and you're like, okay, I don't want my grown-up life to be like this.
I was in my bedroom.
In your bedroom?
I was in my bedroom, and I was sitting, and my dad had, we had 2 bedrooms in our house, and the front bedroom was big enough, and my sister and I squabbled. So he'd put a partition between the bedrooms so we could have half each. And I had one window, and I was looking out of the window, and I'd scraped the ice. It was winter. I'd scraped the ice off with my finger. And I remember feeling, just the weight of the world on my shoulders, and I just thought, I don't want to live my life like this forever. I don't. I want to be free, and I want to be able to be a child, because I knew that I was an adult from a very, very young age. I knew that, and I accepted that responsibility.
Was it spoken, or was it just assumed that you
just
would?
assumed? A friend of mine read the book, who knows me very well, and she said, and this is, it made me cry what she said, and she said, you read this book and you hear this young little girl with the roar of a lion, and as you get to the end of the book, this lioness stands and she roars. But that's the common thread through this, it's the roar of a lion, and I think it was that survival instinct. And when you're a child and you grow up in that sort of family, you think you don't think you're different, so you assume that everybody is in the same boat. And it wasn't an unhappy childhood, but it was a tough childhood, and it was the means to survive. You know, my dad would go on a gambling sort of exercise, and he wouldn't come home for weeks on end, and my mum was poorly. You know, what was I going to do? Sit there and wait for us to be taken into care? I had to get up and fight with what I had and what I knew, and that's what I did, and I would do the same thing again tomorrow.
So you were, I guess, a coper and a good girl at home, and then
I was a good girl.
Yeah, still a good girl.
I can be naughty from time to time now, you know. But as a young teenager, I was a good girl. I kind of, wanted to, walk within the boundaries of what was set. If my mum said you have to be home by 9, I was in by 10 to 9, and I very rarely pushed the boundaries. But I did leave home when I was 16 years old as well, which a lot of, children, teenagers. I mean, if my son said he was leaving home at 16, I'd be absolutely horrified.
But you were probably nearly 26 by the time you were 16.
But I was still good. When I went to live with the Sewells, I was still well behaved. I didn't smoke. I've never taken drugs. I'd have a glass of wine, but I would never turn up sort of drunk. So I kind of really did, play it. I wanted to be accepted, and I wanted life to be good.
So your experience at school, which was not happy and not being academic, and so therefore being condemned as being lazy or stupid or whatever, that must have been really hard when your whole persona was about being good and coping and working hard. Actually,
I didn't understand what was. Now in hindsight, I'm 53 years old. I'm not frightened of what I can't do anymore. But when you're a child, you want to just fit in. You want to be like everybody else, and I knew I wasn't. And that moment in the book where I'm caught cheating because I'm looking. I didn't want to cheat. It wasn't in my nature to do that. But I didn't want to look foolish, and I didn't want to be the one who, when the grades were read out, that I was yet again the last one. So I looked at it. It was a multiple choice exam as well. So I was looking and thinking, okay, I can see where that tick is. I could copy that. And when that teacher made me stand on my chair, and I remember the feelings of total humiliation standing there. I don't blame the teacher, by the way, because she was dealing with a situation that she thought was something else. I remember my sock falling down my leg, and I remember the boy behind going, I can see up your skirt. I remember all of that and the total humiliation of it. And I remember sitting there thinking, I will fight. And that roar of that lion, that I'll find a way. And I did. And all the way through my school, I kind of boxed all those emotions and didn't let the lid off any of those emotions at all, just kept them all kind of nice and neat. And always in the back of my mind was, I will show you, I will make a success of my life. But I knew I was never going to be able to sit exams. I still couldn't. If you asked me to do it today, I couldn't. And it doesn't really matter now, but at the time it really did to me. And when I first left school and somebody said to me, you'll never get a job, you've got no qualifications. Well, I did get a job. And there are people in this world who don't fit in, who are square pegs and being shoved into round holes. You know what? Just we have to sometimes accept that people learn in different ways and yet I can run with the most intellectual and have a conversation now. So a lot of it's confidence as well.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking, throughout your childhood, money was quite tight, and when your mum went back to work, she was a manicurist for Revlon.
Yeah.
Lips and Tips, is that right?
She did. She was. I don't know whether she would do lips, but I suppose she did makeup. But she was a great manicurist. That was.
And then she went to work for an amazing woman called Madame Lubati, which is really where.
Yeah.
That's where your passion.
Yeah.
Was. What's the word? Ignited. Yes, ignited is the word I was looking for.
It was. Actually, this room is very like that laboratory. And I think I've gone all the way through my life trying to recreate that laboratory in that room. She was the most incredible. You know, if she was in a movie, Helen Mirren would play her. You know, she was sort of regal. She was very beautiful, blonde hair. And she was in her late 70s when I met her. And the love of the cosmetic industry, what she taught me, what she imparted to me. And she was one of my first best friends. You know, I didn't really have lots of friends as a little girl, but she was one of my best friends, and I'd go off to have tea with her and sit in the laboratory all day long, because my mum used to get there at sort of 8:30, 9 in the morning for the first client, and I'd still be there at 6 in the evening. So I would spend all day with her. And I loved my grandmother, but Madame Lubati was a pretty amazing human being. She was very funny, very amusing, and so creative.
And she was, so her specialism was skincare.
Yes.
And she made all her own products.
She did, yeah.
And do some of your recipes come from her?
I think the yogurt face mask that we've actually put the recipe in the book, that is almost exactly as she used to make it and I used to make it. I wouldn't say the recipes... the formulas are the same, but some of the face masks I still make today. You know, I'll buy a little kilo of sandalwood and some almond oil, and I'll sit there and make them for myself, nobody else. They're all exactly the same as she used to. And you know, why fix something that ain't broke if those products worked? And she was incredible.
Do you think she saw something in you?
I think she saw something in my mum. Definitely, I think she saw herself in my mum, and I think she saw in me whatever it was she saw in my mum, if you see what I mean. Yeah. It was almost like a baton that you hand down. She saw a young kid who was, the things she told me about her childhood, I'm not sure were true or not, but I loved all the stories, and it was like having this incredible fairy tale book that was real in front of you. And I used to sit there with my eyes literally like dinner plates listening to her. I think she saw something pretty amazing. I think she nurtured something in me. It's all very well to see something. She could see that my memory was amazing, and she admired, and just as hers was starting to become fleeting, so she would rely on me to remember. So when her dementia really started to kick in, she wouldn't remember the formulations, and she'd take my hand, and I always knew when she was scared. Makes me slightly teary thinking about it, because it was such a vulnerable moment. And she'd say, I can't find the marshmallow root, and I go, no, it's just here, it's just right here. You know, there was just sort of things, and dementia is such a cruel disease because it slowly takes the person, and they are aware. And she was aware at that point, so she would rely on my memory, and I think she admired that, you know, tremendously, that I would know exactly. And she'd say, remember where it is, Jo, remember where it is, because if I lose it again, I went, you won't lose it, madam, I'll find it for you. So, you know, but she was an amazing woman. I've tried to find photographs of her. I've looked everywhere and I can't find one. But I would have loved to have put that in the book.
And at the time, was she very well known in London?
There were two great sort of skincare doyens. There was Countess Charkey, who you probably remember, and Countess Lubati, and they were the two women who everybody went to have all the elite in society and royalty. They would go to them to have their faces cleaned, and it was, you know, it was a very new kind of era and time of beauty. You know, people hadn't gone to have their treatments and facials and things like that. So it was they were really pioneering women, the two of them.
How old were you around this point?
Oh, I was about 8 to about 11. So I was, you know, with them for a very long time. But I watched her, you know, towards the end, she really did deteriorate and had to go into a home, which was devastating for me, and I couldn't bear it. But my mum, you know, she did what she could. And it's funny, I remember her, I don't think I put this in the book, I can't remember whether I have or not, but before she went into a home and was very, very sick, she gave my mum a pair of diamond earrings, and they're sort of wonderful, like little diamond roses. And my mum had them made into rings for my sister and I still have mine. I remember sort of looking at it the other day, just thinking, wow, if you could talk, if you could tell stories because of the things, you know, that you'd seen. And she was that really special person. But I've been lucky in my life. I've met lots of people like that who've really given part of themselves into my life and enabled me to be really successful. But I just wish I could just say thank you, because she really did. I think she flicked passion and creativity in me, and it never. And she had this wonderful saying. She'd go, Jo, if you can't do something brilliantly, don't do it at all, like that. And it stuck with me. It has stuck with me all my life. And sometimes I'll switch off from something and I think, I can't be brilliant at that, so I don't want to do it.
Fair enough. Madam. So by the time Madam went into a home and your mum took over, you were about 11. So at what point did you think, I want to do this, I want to make this my...
I don't think I felt that. It was, I think what I saw was something I was good at, really good at, and something I found quite easy. Most of things in life I didn't. I mean, I loved helping my dad when I was the magician's assistant. I was really good at that. So I knew I was good at sort of certain things. I felt when Mum was really, really poorly and there was no money and there was no food, I knew that I could make face creams, and I knew those face creams could make money. So I don't think I really looked at it as a business or my golden ticket, if you will, until much, much later when I was sort of 16, 17, 18. But it was a means to survive. And I think a lot of people will recognise that emotion, that, you know, you sometimes just need to survive to the end of the week, to the end of the month, pay the rent and do whatever. And so that's what I saw very much making face creams all about. But it came very naturally to me, very naturally.
So you left school at 15?
I was 15. I never did any mocks. I never did any GCSEs. I never took any exams. And I can't remember the last day of school. And even writing this book, I thought it'll come back to me. It didn't. And for whatever reason, I can't remember ever. You know, like most people remember, don't they, their last moments at school. I don't. I can remember. It was well before Christmas, and so I must have been 15. Yeah,
it must have been beginning of.
Well, I didn't do any mocks or anything at all. So, just before I was 15 and 15, I never went back to school, and no one ever came and found out why.
Great.
And I sometimes it's so weird. A few years ago, I went through huge anxiety issues, and I would have this continuing dream that I had to go back to school and finish schooling and get my exams.
Horrible.
And it would really panicked me, because it kept sending me back, and of course it was where I felt insecure, and it was probably the most insecure time of my life, and that's where my subconscious was taking me back to.
That's really interesting. And was that the same time as you were down the bottom of the mountain?
Yes, yeah. I felt very isolated, very alone, and anxiety completely took over my life. I mean, I had to go and get help. It was pretty awful. Yeah.
Which it sounds amazing looking at you now and everything you've achieved.
Creative people often have. I mean, I went to an amazing woman called Dr. Anna Albright. It's actually the first time I've ever spoken about this. And I'm not frightened. You know, when it happens to you, you often feel very scared of admitting that, and it's not until you come through that and you admit it that you realise it doesn't have the hold over you that it did. But I went through it. It was a really awful time. I doubted myself, and it was because I didn't know who I was anymore, and I had no control. And suddenly there I was, Jo Malone, just standing in this valley and thinking, what am I going to do? I wanted to get up every day and either create fragrance or make a face. It's what I'd done. When now you've read that, you understand much more probably of the person that I am. The reason I came back was not to build another business or because I'm a career woman. It's because I truly loved, and I'd done it from the age of 8 years old, and it was my best friend. And suddenly my best friend wasn't there, and I wasn't the person that I had been. So yeah, that's probably why anxiety knocked on my door and gave me a good old shake-up. But even that I wouldn't let take away from who I was. I found a way back. I found my raw.
You're raw. And it's jumping around a little bit, but we're in this period of time. How did it feel to lose your name?
I didn't feel I'd lost my name. And if we put it in perspective, I just fought cancer.
Yes,
I thought I was going to lose my life. So, when you face your own mortality, and all I wanted to do was survive for my son and my husband. That was all that I cared about during that time. So I'd come through a year of chemotherapy every 5 days. So I'd gone through surgery after surgery and diagnosis after diagnosis, and just when I thought I was beating it, you've got to do chemo all over again. That moment in the book is just, and that is how it was. So I'd come through that. I didn't feel, and I was incredibly grateful to the Lauder family, because without Evelyn Lauder, I wouldn't be here right now.
Amazing woman.
Incredible. I along with a lot of other people in this world, but I would not be here right now, right this minute. So I'd come through all of that, and then I went back into the business. I was standing in Madison Avenue, and I just didn't belong there. I can't explain why. Nobody did anything mean to me. It wasn't anything to do with that. And everyone tried to talk me around, and I was determined. I thought the cancer was going to come back. So losing my name was the last thing you think of. It's like, I want my life back, and all I could care about was seeing my son go to school for the first day, then my son get married. And any woman that goes through that and has children, that is your first reaction, my family. When I came through that and I realised I wasn't going to die, and I was going to see my son go to school and do all those things, that's when it hit in. And I think I was just hugely naive or hugely smart. I'm not really sure which one. I was probably in between the two of them. I'd done a great deal. My life was comfortable for the rest of my life. But I didn't realise in selling your name, or not just my name, but the love of what I did, how much of a person that was. Now, if you asked me to do the same deal today, I would do it so differently. I would still sell to the Lauders. I would still do all those things, but I would do it very differently. But any entrepreneur would say that. But there are moments sometimes when it happened actually just a few days ago, and I felt that knife sort of go like that. It doesn't happen to me a lot now, but I do sometimes feel that's me, I'm Jo. But I did the deal, I shook hands, and I cashed the cheque. So you can't sit there and moan about something like that, and I'm alive. And I'm alive to go on and build again. So I refuse to feel bitter, I refuse to feel resentment, and I refuse to look back in my life. I'm going to look forward and change it.
So one of the questions I was going to ask you, which you have more or less answered really, was, you'd sold your business, you survived cancer, you had presumably quite a lot of money in the bank, you could have just put your feet up, rode horses, and instead you went, I know, I'll start another business from scratch. And we all know how easy that is. What was the drive for that?
I think that it's that working class girl in me that I love. I didn't have as much money as everybody thought I had. But I had enough to feel comfortable and certainly not have to worry about rent for the rest of my life. That was a certainty. But it didn't, you know, I remember being sort of 6 months into it, and I'd had lunch with everybody and I'd wandered around. I knew everything in M&S food aisles. And I just thought, I'm too young to sit here and think, what can I, you know, who am I and all of those things. And I'm too old to start anything from scratch, as in a whole new career and go off to university. And, you know, I thought about all of those things. The other things I wanted to do is I wanted to build a vineyard. I thought I'd be really good at that. And I wanted to build a hotel.
Skills, though, in a way.
You know, your nose and sense of smell. But ultimately, it's fragrance. You know, I probably will go on and do something like that, if I'm really honest now, because this business will enable me to be able to do other things. I want to do something in food. I wanted to do something. I thought of having a cashmere company as well. I mean, I thought of all different sorts of things, that entrepreneur sort of standing up.
But they're all sense things.
They were all things I loved. They were all things that I couldn't. I thought about getting a job as well, and I wrote out my CV, which just looked awful. And it's so funny.
I just haven't had a CV for years.
Well,
I don't know if I know how to do one.
When I tell that story now, people say, "Have you any idea? We would have given you a job at the drop of a hat, but nobody thought you were interested." And because I didn't talk about how I really felt, I felt really embarrassed that I'd put myself in that position as well. So, you know, if there was no one else to blame but myself, and people had warned me, so there I was. But at the same time now, if I'd stayed, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have done the things I've done. I wouldn't be writing a column for the Evening Standard every Monday. I wouldn't be travelling with the Great Campaign. I wouldn't do any of those things. I wouldn't have built a tapas bar. So you can't look back at life and say, you know, oh dear, what did I do? I did it. I learned from the mistakes that I made, and I got up, dusted myself off, picked up what was left and started again.
And someone was saying to me yesterday in a completely different context, why do people expect the decisions they make to be easy? And I think it doesn't make a decision wrong if it takes a while to work through the outcome.
Isn't that what being human beings is all about? We don't go through life getting everything right. And if we did, we'd be pretty boring race of people. The whole point is to learn. And if you make a mistake, you learn from that mistake. But it causes you to be resilient. It causes you to look and to realise as well that you don't have all the answers. I don't feel I have all the answers. I'm still out there trying to find them. But that's the key. I'm out there trying to find them, rather than just sitting and accepting life for what life has given me, and I shouldn't expect any more. Well, I do. The fact is, when we opened the doors here in Elizabeth Street, I was about building a global brand. When I sat around that kitchen table, it was about building a global brand. It wasn't about fulfilling a hobby or having a nice little business that just gave me a bit of pocket money and employed 6 people. This was always about building another global brand. And I set out with that in mind, and in doing that, I kind of made a few mistakes along the way. But I obviously got a lot right, and I've learnt from that.
I mean, it's kind of a ludicrous question, but it's not.
Oh, I love those questions.
Obviously a massive difference between starting a business the first time and starting a business the second time.
Yes, it is.
I mean, massive. But what has surprised you about the differences?
What surprised me? The first time round, when you build for the first time, naivety is your best friend, because you jump and you have no idea how far, when your feet are going to hit the floor. Also, I was a lot younger as well. So I think the second time round, there was not as much naivety, but it was still there. And I think that made me feel to myself, you haven't got it all right, girl. You need to go back. You need to rethink this. Packaging was one thing I got horribly wrong. Running towards a business that it's like seeing the best friend that you haven't seen for a long time. You just want to go and hug them and go, I'm back, I'm here. So that was different. The world is very different as well. I think what was amazing was, you know, the relationships that we had. I mean, you were there way, way back when I built Jo Malone, and you were still there when I built Jo Loves, and a lot of those relationships were still there. And a lot of people that we all grew up with were now top of their game. But the relationships were still there, which was really, really nice. I can't think of anything. I'm trying to think of something that surprised me, that some people's attitudes. It's funny when when you step aside from something that you are so known for, it's almost as though your voice, not just your voice goes, but everything about it goes with it. And suddenly when you're on the way back up again, back up it comes again. Now, in the first time round...
I'm rolling my eyes repeatedly here.
Okay, how many people can roll their eyes when they've been in that situation? It's like, yeah, I know what you're talking about. And I'm not fooled by that. I'm not going to make enemies of people, but I know those people that are there because I'm on the way up, and I know those people that are there because they're really true, great friends. So, you know, but that wasn't really a surprise. I can't think of anything that was a surprise. I had more good surprises than bad ones.
Do you think, I wondered if in a weird way, almost like writing a first book, or in a weird way, is it easier the first time?
It's much easier because you have that naivety. So when the second time round, it's like flipping the telescope around the wrong way. And when you start a business, you build something and you organically evolve and you grow and you make a few mistakes, but no one sees them. For me, I get out there, I'm standing in my bra and knickers on a stage, and the world is looking, thinking, she started a new brand, what's she doing? And I just made
I don't like the box.
I mean, so many. But I knew it was wrong. My gut knew it. I mean, now when I look at that,
it was red, wasn't it?
It was red. So all the red is on the inside now. So I knew I wanted red, but I understand why I did that now. It was like a teenager dyeing their hair red.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, you've got red hair, but I know
yours
is natural.
Like bright red, pink. Yeah.
Like dyeing your hair or doing something that says, I'm here and I'm going to be heard. And that's what that whole bit was about. And it was, if only I'd given myself a little bit of time, I probably wouldn't have reached that, but I would have got closer to it. But it was, what I knew, what was inside that box is what really mattered, that bottle of fragrance or that candle, and that's kind of what really mattered. And it took me time. So if I'd started this the first time round, you wouldn't have seen all of that. You would have just seen that. But again, I kind of think that that's almost an important story to tell, because when small companies and SMEs start and they think they have to get it right all first time, you don't. You make mistakes and you figure out what you're going to do, and you know, it was costly, and I had to sort of lick my wounds for a bit, and Gary was really cross because there were too many noughts on the end of it, but we got through it. Look where we are now. You know, I came through it, found who I really was again, knew what I wanted. Red dot was the last little bit in the puzzle, and so I don't regret learning and going through that. And it's also a really important story to tell people. It's okay. You don't get it all right first of all.
To screw up.
It's okay. You find, you know, who you really are by really digging deep and saying, this hurts and I don't want to be here, but I still want to carry on.
You mentioned Gary then, and we haven't talked about him at all, which is completely remiss given the huge part he's played in your life. Do you think, in fact, I'm going to get a picture. We're going to have a picture of Gary.
On our wedding day.
Can we have the wedding picture? This.
Oh my goodness, we look like real kids, don't we?
This is gorgeous. Yeah, look, they look literally about 12. How old were you?
22.
22. And how long had you been with Gary then?
About 2 years. Yeah, we dated for a long time. I mean, he really does look like a teenager there. And he's just my soulmate. You know, that day I married him and I said my vows, I meant every single word, and so did he. And my goodness, have we lived through literally sickness and health, richer and poorer, better or worse, and, you know, till death do us part. And he is my best friend. And I don't like, actually, I wouldn't want to not be in business with him. He just is the greatest business partner, as well as, you know, my husband and my best friend and soulmate.
And you launched Jo Malone from your flat?
We did, yeah.
The two of you together, right?
Yeah.
Back then?
Well, he was in the building industry, and I was doing faces, and that's when he came home and came into the kitchen, and his dinner tasted of bath oil and his cup of tea with bubbly all over the top, and he said to me, I can't do this anymore. So if it hadn't been for that, he said, and he did say to me, I don't think we'll carry on being husband and wife. I can't live like this anymore, Jo. There's no life. And there wasn't.
Because you were...
I was just working from sun up to sundown. You know, I really was. And everything was about my pursuit of... And what I was trying to do was make it all safe for us. So we never had to worry. So we would never have to sit and sort of scrape on the window and say, I never want to live like... That's what I was trying to do. But of course, in doing that, I was robbing us of our life. And I think sometimes you can work, and you forget what you're doing it for. And I think that was definitely what I did in those beginning. And when he said, we need a shop, and I was just, I don't want a shop. I don't want everybody having my product. I mean, when I think about it now, I mean, who was I? And then when we did have a shop, I don't want my name in a bag. I mean, I just dug my heels in. Yeah, no, exactly. And he would just carry on and just take absolutely no notice of me. But he is one amazing human being. And, you know, I would never be where I am, and he would never be where he is without each other. So it's a good partnership.
It's really good. And so you've told me this story before, but I'm going to make you tell me it again. Whose idea, when you first launched Jo Malone, whose idea was it to walk up and down the street outside the shop carrying your own carrier bags with the name on that you didn't want?
Guess who that was?
Wouldn't be his, would it?
It was him. It was him. So the thing I love about Gary is he will think up ideas that cost nothing but have huge kind of value in them. And we had such a small amount of money. Actually, when we do the same with Joe Loves, by the way, as well now.
Walk up and down the road with carrier bags.
empty carrier bags as well. So, he calls it walking the dogs. We have to walk the dogs.
Oh, God.
So whoever's, you know, if you've got a young business and whatever. Now, I can't remember where we were, but I came, anyway, we were sort of at home or whatever, and there was a whole lot of bags. And I said, have you been shopping? You know, what have you brought home? And he said, nothing. I said, what do you mean nothing? You've got 8 carrier bags there with you. I said, what's in them? He goes, nothing. I said, well, why are you carrying? He said, no one else knows that. He's absolutely right.
God, yeah.
So if you walk up the street holding a whole lot of bags which are branded, people think you've been shopping. But actually, and that's how we converted New York as well. We sent 1,000 bags over to New York, and people would just fill them and just walk around with them. And walk in the dogs. It is so simple and yet so clever.
So to talk about fragrance a little bit, what was the first fragrance of your kind of career? The first thing that you made?
The very, very first one. I mean, nutmeg and ginger was the sort of the turning point.
Christmas.
But I did lots. I did a jonquil. I did a...
What's jonquil?
Jonquil is like a little sort of very floral. It's like a jensen, like a blue white flower. It smells a bit like a tuberose. I remember doing a jonquil fragrance. I remember making something with geranium, rose, lemongrass. So I did all kinds of different... I can't remember the very, very first one I did. Nutmeg and ginger, because I would put them into body lotions. That's how I first started, because I couldn't afford a license to make it into alcohol. So it was never perfume. I used to make the oils and I used to blend them together with these little green bottles, pop them all into a body lotion, mix them up. So it was whatever I was making at that time.
And what was the first proper Jo Malone fragrance?
Probably nutmeg and ginger.
Nutmeg and ginger.
Yeah.
And did that have memories for you, or was it just what you had to hand?
It was all these little bottles, and I would just sit in the morning, and as I would make the face creams up, I would also make fragrances for body lotions. And you know, it was the one that stuck, that when I used it on someone's arms, something just, I could smell it in the flat all day. It was just one of those fragrances, and it was like any creative process, it was something that took me on a whole different sort of channel.
And for Jo Loves, you started with pomelo.
Yeah.
Why was that?
Well, after not creating fragrance for 5 years and then coming back and doing it again, I couldn't do it. So there I was around the kitchen table. Oh no, I couldn't. It didn't come back naturally. Well, I hadn't forgotten, but I could still create fragrance, but it wasn't brilliant. And I was really worried because there we were around the kitchen table. We'd already
a fragrance brand.
Yeah, exactly, and it was like, oh no, what am I going to do? Yeah, no, exactly. That's exactly what I thought. And we'd gone away on holiday. We had a little break. It was half term. And we'd gone to this lovely little place called Parrot Key in the Turks and Caicos, which is an island in the middle of nowhere. And I was still going through all these anxiety issues. It was during just after the TV show, and I kept getting these terrible palpitations and numbness in my arm. I mean, all those kind of symptoms, and I couldn't breathe properly and everything. So we'd gone to Parrot Key for a little break, and I'd took myself off every morning up the beach and walked back again. And I would say to myself, why can't you create fragrance, Jo? Why, what is it? What is happening to you? And I would quiz myself. And so one morning, very, very early, I was walking up the beach on my own. And that's not the moment that's in the book. Oh, we haven't seen that picture, have you?
No.
Okay, so there's this, I'll show you the picture where I'm walking on the beach. So it's there, that's the beach I walked on. And
oh wow!
And we've gone back there many times. It's so beautiful.
That beach there.
And as I walked up the beach, I looked at it and I could see something in the water, sort of swimming by the side of me, and it was a black stingray. It was like a big, sort of.
Yes. Yeah.
And it was swimming right the way by the side of me, and I stopped and I looked and it stopped, and then I walked and it walked, and it followed me all to the end of the beach, and then came back. And there was no one else on the beach. You can see. But it was just a desert island, and it turned and it swam all the way back with me as I walked, and it just suddenly I realised that that's how close creativity is to you. We don't own creativity. It didn't belong to me. It wasn't mine, but it swam alongside with me for a long time, and it was just like that stingray, and I only had to realise it was still there, and it would all come back. And I got to our sunbeds, and I looked at everything that I saw. The stingray swam off, and I could see all the white rolled towers and my fizzy water that was sitting there, and I just took every single minute and I put it into a fragrant note, and that's pomelo. And the reason pomelo is my best friend, it's why the book is scented with pomelo, is it really took me back onto that path of creativity. And I've not created fragrance in the same way as I did 25 years ago. I could create it completely differently, still with the same integrity, but not with the same creativity, because I didn't own it then, I don't own it now. It just chooses to walk by the side of me every day.
Oh. One last question. As well as your family, your book is dedicated to every entrepreneur who every day takes one more step of courage and never gives up the dream. What one advice would you give that entrepreneur who's reading your book? What one bit of advice? Sorry.
Find your roar and let the world listen and hear it, and don't let people tell you can't, or it's not the right time, or there is always 101 excuses why you can't do something, and there's only often one real reason why you should. But I would say build and create because it makes you happy. Because if you're not happy and contented and fulfilled, you know what? Nothing else really makes sense. And if it's really what you want, and there are a lot of days where you want to quit. I know those days, and so do you. But you just never quit on a bad day either. Always quit on a good day, because the landscape of your life can change so dramatically, so quickly, you end up regretting that decision. But if you make that decision when you can see the whole landscape and you feel content, you're much more likely not to make a mistake.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Jo.
Thank you.